thanks for joining us and believing in us that we had some substance tonight. So we hope to reward you. Last night we covered our first part in this series called Biological Proofs of Evolution Fail, the Evidence Cries Out Designed. And tomorrow night we have our third part and final part this semester, which is Geology, Who's the Hero of the Plot, Time, Water, or Catastrophe. So that will also be at the same time and place here at 7. So the Nuttings are our speakers tonight. I will introduce them shortly. And they will also be sharing at our campus church. We meet on Saturday nights, and that's our normal worship meeting. And so we will have worship kind of like a format when we meet, but instead of having a biblical message, we're going to have them share their story of over 40 years in ministry and kind of like how they've got to where they are and where they're going. So we're excited about that. That's going to be, you're all welcome. That's going to be on Saturday night at our church. Flyers about that are on the table. So, and speaking of that, yep, we have our info table over here. We have some materials from the Nuttings ministry called Alpha Omega Institute. So you can sign up for their free newsletter if you want or get some of their information. And we have some good news on the table, somebody. So check out the good news. Come on. And we also have other things of interest. So why are we doing this presentation? I'll start briefly by telling my story. I like to tell my story. Do you like to tell your story? Yeah. Come on. Yeah. So when you got good news, you want to tell somebody. Yeah. So I want to tell you what was good news to me. So I used to love the outdoors, and I would always spend a lot of time in the outdoors. I think I've gone to northern Minnesota on a canoe trip about 45 times. I'm 46 years old, so almost every year of my life I've been on a canoe trip up there. And so I have a big tattoo on my back of the Boundary Waters, you know. I like it out there. So anyhow, but when I was up there, you know, this is just part of my story, but when I was up there, I would always be lonely, and I always felt like it was empty. You felt kind of like haunted, you know, like something's not right. I just feel so empty out here in this beautiful place. Something's missing, you know. And I was here in college, and I heard about Jesus Christ. You know, someone wanted to do a Bible study, and we started meeting. I let that guy into my apartment every Friday night, big Starbucks, and he would tell me great news, this message of hope, these powerful stories about Jesus Christ. And so I began to believe, but I wasn't sure if it was real. And then Jesus came in my apartment one night, and he revealed himself to me in the Spirit, and I knew that I was a sinner. I knew he was the Lord. I knew I needed him desperately. And he, through that night's process, led me to repentance and receiving him, that if he'd save me, I'd follow him forever. And here I am, 20-some years later, a fool for Christ. So on this topic, included. Some Christians won't be a fool for Christ in this way, but this is included in my story and some of ours. So I became a child of God, and now I belong to the Father. And in the process of that, I said, okay, well, the Bible's the truth, because that's how I met Jesus, was hearing the Bible. So I'm like, I'm going to believe everything it says. You read the beginning, and it says, in 6 days, God created everything. The heavens and the earth, you know, is the sum up of Genesis 1. And we see special creation is what we call it. We don't see evolution in the Bible. And so, but in our society, everywhere, it's evolution, right? And we are going to get into science tonight. Don't worry, I won't be speaking the whole time. But go
ahead, you're doing good.
Thanks. In museums, right? In National Geographic, in public school, in national parks, on television, everything you get from the time you're small all the way up through higher education is evolution. So this, we believe, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but it robs us of creation's witness to God's glory. You know, that God is who he is in his amazing eternal power, right? Created this amazing place called Earth and this solar system, etc. And it's meant to glorify him, you know? And so also part of that message is that you were created in God's image and his likeness. And so you're infinitely valuable. I think William Lane Craig said, he's a philosopher, he said in the Christian worldview, one human being is more valuable than the entire material universe. So when you understand the Creator and His story about who we are, you understand how valuable human beings are. So that's a powerful philosophical statement. So you're not an accident, and you have ultimate meaning. And that's why this subject's important to us. So God didn't create mutation, disease, suffering, or death. They do exist, but He didn't create them. And He didn't use evolution. That's our position. But according to the Bible, man's rebellion brought these things into the world. So you got to understand from God's text our history. How do we get here? And after death, what about our future? We won't cease to exist. We won't be reincarnated. It says there's an appointed demand to die once, to live once, and then comes the judgment. And so you have an eternal spirit. You're going to live forever. And you're either going to enjoy God's blessings, life, joy, and peace, or you're going to be separated from Him in everlasting shame and contempt. And we care about you, and we don't want that to happen. And you don't have to believe in creation to be a Christian, but we do feel like this is important for understanding your value and believing God's text. So we want you to believe that ultimately Jesus died as a substitutionary sacrifice for you to make and to pay for our sins against a holy God, and that He rose from the dead to prove that He actually did that. And you can believe that whether you believe in creation or not, but it helps when you understand there's evidence for the whole text of the Bible, and God meant what He said when He said how He did it. About Jesus' death and resurrection, John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him will not perish but have everlasting life." And so that's the most important verse in the Bible, so I want to share that with you. That's our heartbeat. And many people, Christians, that believe in evolution as well. But tonight we hope to continue making a compelling case, just like we started last night, against the grand story of evolution and for special creation, and to help you just trust and then discover your destiny revealed in the Bible. So tonight's presentation is going to be an hour and 15 minutes, and we're holding you to that, Dave and Mary Jo. With Q&A following, a little bit about our speakers. Dave is from Grand Junction, Colorado, and Mary Jo is from Mankato, Minnesota. And they both like hiking and spending time outdoors. Dave's an avid fly fisherman. He's always telling me how he's up on the Grand Mesa catching trout. Every time I call him, I don't know what else he does practically either. No, just kidding. Mary Jo enjoys spending time with her grandkids. They are both former evolutionists by their own description, who've carefully studied the scientific issues and became convinced of the truth of creation. They are founders and directors of Alpha Omega Institute and have been teaching creation science for over 40 years. They have degrees from Colorado State University in math and biology. And then Dave basically got his geology degree there too, his undergrad, but didn't get the paper on that one. And he's just fascinated with geology, and that's what he wanted. He wanted the education. He didn't care about the paper. Anyhow, they also got their master's degrees in Institute from Creation Research. That's where they got them from, in biology with a science education emphasis and geology for Dave. Mary Jo was the first one. So they both taught at the high school and college level. These presentations are being live streamed to our YouTube channel, so you can, if you want to catch a recording, you can get a flyer from the table. It has a QR code on it. And our YouTube channel is called Maranatha, if you can spell that, space MN. Without further ado, I think it's Dave Nutting's going to start. Oh, Mary Jo. So let's welcome, please help me welcome Mary Jo Nutting.
Just for a few minutes. Well, I grew up in Mankato, like you said. We both live in Colorado now. We love it out there in the mountains. I went to Gustavus Adolphus College for 1 year. Then I went to what used to be Mankato State, which is now Minnesota something, MSU, and now and then I ended up moving to Colorado because I wanted to go to the mountains. I had a real I had a real academic reason to go, right? I wanted to be in the mountains. And I met Dave out there, and then we got married, and we've been traveling the world since that time, really. We got started in this creation evolution debate, which when we met, we didn't know there was such thing as a creation debate, really. We had been taught evolution in the schools, and I thought evolution was a proven scientific fact. I never doubted it because that's all we were ever taught. Now, I did believe in God, I believed in Jesus, but I didn't know how all this fit together. I thought, well, creation is a religious explanation, and evolution is a scientific explanation for the origin of life and all the things we see in the universe. And so when I went on after college to teach in public schools, and then later on in the small college up in Alaska, I thought, well, I taught evolution because that's what the books taught, and I didn't know any better. One day I was shopping in a little secondhand store, though, and I found a little book for 5 cents. It was called Evolution, the Fossils Say No. And I invested 5 cents, bought that little book, brought it home, I read it, and I went, wow, and it was information I had never heard before. And so I gave it to Dave. He's got a lot better background in geology and paleontology than I had or have still to this day. But we looked at that book and we said, this guy's either nuts or he knows something we don't know. And we decided to do some research on our own. When you're in school, you're so busy doing what you have to do just for keep up with classes, right? And so you do whatever you have to do to keep up with classes. And finally, once you're out of school, hopefully you have some time to start digging in and studying things that really interest you. And so we started studying this whole issue of creation and evolution, and what do the fossils really say about evolution? Over a period of time, as we started studying this stuff, we became very convinced that, wait a minute, these crazy people called creationists had some really good points. And we became even more interested in it. And so our journey from believing in evolution to creation didn't take place in, just overnight. We studied the Bible, but we also were studying science. And the science that we saw seemed to fit better with what the Bible taught than what evolution had taught us over all those years. And so we became very convinced of the truth of the creation model and how it can explain so much that we see on the earth today. Last night we talked about biology, which is really my field of interest. Tonight, Dave's going to be talking about the fossils, but we will have time at the end for questions. So write your questions down, and we'll be happy to take your questions. We'll be happy to, if you want to talk to us individually, we'll be available for that also. So Dave, you want to come talk about fossils? Some of you might think we are fossils, huh? Some of you young people. Not yet. Not yet.
Okay. All right, very good. So, let me put this on here so I don't wave my arm and throw it across the room. Anyhow, that happens occasionally. Anyhow, yeah, we'll go ahead and just that one that's going to be putting light on the screens. Okay, so I used to be a solid believer in the theory of evolution, never doubted it growing up, but I also threw God in the picture too. So you might say I was kind of a cross between a theistic evolutionist and or a God and an evolutionist. And I always thought that was true until I started studying some of the things that I thought was 100% good proof for evolution. And I found out it wasn't such a good proof for evolution, okay? So anyhow, we're going to be talking about it. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so first of all, most of us are taught in school and the museums, TV, virtually everywhere, that evolution is a proven fact. Right? It's what you see all the time. And we're taught that the fossil record takes a great big bite out of the biblical record. And I will tell you this, that I used to believe that. But I also grew up as believing in evolution. In fact, this is a picture of me clear back in the 5th grade, kind of handsome guy then. I still am, right? No. But anyhow, yeah, I got a little bit older, but I was teaching how the study of rocks, fossils, dinosaurs all proved evolution on that television program when I was in the 5th grade. So already at that age, I could teach it. Why? Because that's all I had ever been taught. I thought it was great proof. All right. Well, then Mary Jo found that book while we were teaching on the college level up in Alaska. The book, Evolution of the Fossils Say No, right there. And that book kind of changed our perspective. And so, you know, if you've been taught that evolution's a fact, so therefore you can't trust the Bible, what do? Well, the best option is do some research. Do it on your own. Don't take what I'm saying tonight just because I said it. Do your own research and see what you find out. Here's what happened to me. The more I studied it, the more I realized that evolution is not science. It is a philosophy posing as though it were science. Okay? It's also the pillar of the naturalistic worldview. What does that mean? That means everything in the universe has got to be explained, including you yourself, by only natural processes without any God whatsoever. And that's the philosophy that's been hammered into us for years and years and years, starting even in elementary school. So it's understandable if that's how you come out. You believe in naturalism. You believe that everything can be explained by natural processes without God. And we frequently are told, if you want to be a scientist, you've got to believe in naturalism. You can't take that God thing with you. Well, I think differently, right? I don't like to be chained. I don't like being put in a box, all right? And but so many students are chained to the idea of naturalism, and they never thought there's any other worldview. And there is a supernatural worldview too. And we talked about last night the improbability of the origin of life strictly by evolutionary natural processes, even making one protein. That was just amazingly slim possibility. Like finding a blue marble in a universe filled with red marbles and finding the thing 3 times in a row blindfolded and no fair praying about it. Okay, it's got to be by natural processes. Well, that's just for one protein, okay? And I remember teaching on the university level, and I was teaching college statistics and whatever, and basically I mentioned this. We talked about it in the class for about 10 minutes, okay? About 10 minutes, and we calculated that probability. I showed them how you can do it. If you want to know more about that, come talk to me, all right, later, okay? Anyhow, and then I said this. After we've calculated the probability of one simple protein being one chance in 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 260 times, okay? I said, I don't know what they teach you in the biology class about these kind of statistics, but guess what? In statistics, we call that zero. Okay, it's not going to happen. 5 minutes later, I hear from the department chairman. I understand you're preaching religion in the classroom. I never mentioned God. I never mentioned anything. I just showed the statistical improbability, and we calculated it, okay? And so I showed this department chairman exactly what I did with the students. He said, well, I guess that's not religion. But this creation versus evolution stuff is a touchy subject here at this university. You had better drop it. I didn't. That's why I can be here. Anyhow, yeah. So, you know, what's the answer to all of that? We were talking about that last night. The answer is, even, I don't know what's going on here. Okay, even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded from science. Why? Because it's not naturalistic. You see the box? Okay, tonight, again, like we said last night, thinking is allowed. Okay, we're going to think about this a little bit today. So Darwin published his book in 1859 called On the Origin of Species, okay? So, was Darwin wrong about the fossils? Well, I hate to tell you this. I'm glad to tell you. But he was right on one great big point. You know what he said? Quote, geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chains. And this, perhaps, is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. He said the explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geologic record. In other words, keep digging, you should find those fossils, right? Keep digging. And usually when I go to a university or some other place, and I say the fossils don't support it, they say keep digging. All right, that's basically the same answer. A lot of people don't know it, but they have now found over 1 billion fossils. The thing is, the fossils don't support evolution. Okay? That's the issue that they have. The fossils do not support the evolutionary idea, and I hope you understand that. Here's what Niles Eldredge said about 120 years after Darwin said, keep digging. He says 120 years of paleontological research later, it has become abundantly clear that the fossil record will not confirm this part of Darwin's predictions. Then he said, nor is the problem a miserably poor record. He said the fossil record simply shows this prediction is wrong. All right, we can go to other quotes as well. This one says it pretty clearly, okay? Tonight I'm going to give you 3 good reasons why I think the fossil record supports the biblical record of creation, the fall, and the flood, okay? And offers devastating evidence against the theory of evolution. Okay, hang on to your seats. Here we go. All right. First, if evolution is true, I think these are pretty reasonable predictions that you would expect to find if evolution is true. Number one, you should see a record of pretty much constant change, starting with very simple life forms, getting more and more complex, leaving the fossils in the record in the layers of rock, okay? And you should see a lot of links. You should see that. Is that pretty reasonable? Yeah, of course it is. All right, so if the creation model is correct and we believe God created everything, keep in mind, he created things with ability to adapt to different climates, right? We should see complexity everywhere. Not something simple turning into something more complex, because God already created it. We should see things kind of staying put, the word stasis, okay? Not the type of evolution that's necessary to go from goo to you by way of the zoo, okay? You wouldn't see that. And you should see distinct kinds. One group here, not one kind changing into another kind, okay? So, I think, from my study in geology, that the whole geologic column, the whole study of the rocks, the study of the fossils, now I see it supports creation, the fall, and the flood. Okay? Tonight, we're not going to talk about the flood. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about who's the hero of the plot. Time, lots of water, catastrophe. There's tremendous geologic, archaeologic, cultural evidences that the flood was actually genuine. And boy, did that one take me by surprise way back when. And I've never heard that when I was going through school. All right, so now, according to evolution, the life forms way at the bottom of the record, say over here at the Cambrian, should be extremely simple. All right? But we find these things called trilobites in the fossil record. Now, trilobites, are they simple? No. Look at the trilobite and the head of the trilobite. Way down there, what do you find? You find the trilobites had eyes, compound eyes. There's nothing at all simple about that. Okay? So right from the get-go, you got a problem here. Now they have also found a whole bunch of preserved eyes in the fossil record way down in the Cambrian. That's way, 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 way down in that lower layer, okay? And what do they say? This particular, eye had over 3,000 lenses. And it wasn't just one fossil found, it was a swarm of them, okay? All kinds of them. And they said the eye looks like the eye of a recently swatted fly. Flies' eyes are what? Complex, extremely so, and yet found way down in the Cambrian. Well, here's what they said. Their discovery reveals that some of the earliest animals possess very powerful vision. Similar eyes are found in many living insects, such as robber flies. And when you look at the eye, there's not any difference there. However, according to evolution, guess what? It can't be a robber fly. It can't be, even though there's swarms of these things. Why? Because insects hadn't evolved yet, according to the evolution. And in fact, you see the lower one, the fly eyes, maybe, we're questioning that. They say it's some kind of arthropod eye, but they don't know that. It looks like a fly eye. But the insects came, let's say, 200 million years later. Problem. Okay. Now they found a arthropod, but guess what? It was so well preserved, and some of it had soft tissue, they were able to do a brain scan on this thing. And it too is found in that layer in the Cambrian, way, way down there. And wow, the interesting thing they said, it's identical to the same arthropod that's still living today. No change? Over 500 supposed million years of evolution? That's really weird, isn't it? Denver Museum had an exhibit, and they called it their Cambrian Explosion exhibit. And they said 545 million, I added a word, evolutionary years, because they need time, I don't. Okay, I believe if God's powerful enough to create, he can get the job done. Doesn't need that kind of time. But he said there was an explosion, the exhibit, of life. That's what it says there. And all the different body shapes and parts and plans, get this, the word they used, popped into existence. That doesn't sound like slow and gradual Darwinian evolution, does it? There it is, explosion of life in the Cambrian. So what do we see? Complexity. Way down in those bottom layers. It's amazing. And what about this idea of stasis? Well, here's a shell you can pick up on the beaches today. There's a leaf exactly like we have today, living, right? And both of them have no change. Pine cones are still pine cones. They've now found a fossilized bug and a mite in amber. We have the same bug today. All right, no problem. And dragonflies are still dragonflies. Okay? just recently they found a spider. And guess what they said about this spider? It had reflected eyes, that one, and one they also had in 2019 with the same type of reflective eyes as a spider today. And it looks just like a spider today. Earlier, they knew they found a golden orb spider and their spider web as well. And supposedly 165 million years old, and yet they can identify the species of the thing. Okay? Well, what's wrong with that? There's another thing that they had a long time ago, had found. There was a spider web that was reported having been found in the Silurian period, the bottom arrow there. What do you think those spider webs were trying to catch if insects didn't evolve until another almost 200 million years? All right. Now, I say there was something to it that maybe they were still already around. Okay. When we study fossil insects, it's rather intriguing because insects have always been insects. And one paleontologist said, studying fossil insects is very similar to studying insects living today. Right? Not the change that they would expect. All right, now how about sharks? Denver Museum exhibit. It says the first sharks evolved 450 million evolutionary years ago. Then they said this, sharks have changed very little over the years. Wouldn't you expect some more change? They actually found a living shark. It was still swimming, okay? And what did they say about it? It's identical to the shark you find clear down, supposedly, 450 million years ago. No change, right? Stasis. Now they found a fish clear down in the Cambrian. But what did they say about that guy? It was a vertebrate, great. It had advanced eyes, blood, vessels, gills, digestive system, muscular, swimming. What was it? A fish. Okay? And we have that type of fish, by the way, living today too. Okay? And so the coelacanth, thought to have been extinct about 65 million years ago. Okay? Well, the fishermen off the coast of Madagascar caught some. All right, they brought them in. They found out that there's a whole bunch of them there, and they started doing a video research, etc., on the coelacanth, thought to have been extinct. But it's interesting, it's unchanged, because we have coelacanths clear down there, supposedly 420 million years. No change. At least anything visible from the fossil record, okay? And when they did the research on these coelacanths, they found out one thing they were saying about the coelacanth was wrong. They said that front fin on that thing was not, they used to say it was a proto-leg. Now that's an evolutionary loaded term. Did you know that? Proto-leg basically would mean on its way to becoming a leg. How do they know that? But when they did the research, did the videos, that proto-leg looked a bit fishy. Yeah, it was used as a fin. It wasn't used to pull himself around. All right, when you find a woodpecker or a bird in the fossil record, you can tell it's a bird. Woodpeckers are woodpeckers, there's National Geographic here. When we look at fossil bats, bats are still bats, okay? And there's been over 1,000 fossil bats actually found. Not one of them is an in-between from insectivores to the mammal bats. What's going on? No intermediate stages between bats and insectivores. Anyhow, then when you find hummingbirds, guess what? They're hummingbirds. I like the quotes that the researchers and the reviewers said. the amazing thing about this fossil is that it's essentially a modern hummingbird. He said, my mind is a little blown. I like the bottom one. Where the whole hovering tribe came from remains up in the air. Maybe they're created, right? I like their humor, by the way. Anyhow, cats we find in the fossil record. All right, now they found a lizard in amber. We still know the species of that. We can tell you what he eats because we have the same species today. Okay, same one, no different. All right, so that's what we say by staying put. Stasis, not the general kind of evolutionary change you would expect to find. About this idea of distinct kinds, when you go to a 5th grade textbook, they'll show you how one kind changed into another kind. And one of the things I enjoy doing when I talk to little guys, all right, I really like it. I ask them, when you see a picture like that, what question should you ask? What is it?
What's the evidence?
What's the evidence? Okay, you got it. Okay, what's the evidence? Okay, when you actually look at it, you find out there's no evidence. You have the salamander, yes, you have the mouse, but you don't have the things in between. Okay, the transitions are drawn. It's great artwork, but it's not the actual evidence. Okay, it's just not there. All right, here's David Kitts, writing in a magazine called Evolution, by the way. He's an evolutionist. He says evolution requires intermediate forms between species, but the study of fossils, paleontology, does not provide them. All right. We've got Errol White specializing in fish paleontology. He says, but whatever ideas authorities may have on the subject, the lungfishes, that's your great granddaddy, according to evolution, okay? But he said the lungfishes, like every other major group of fishes, have their origins firmly based on, what's that word? Nothing. Ooh. Then as an evolutionist, he said, I have often thought how little I should like to have to prove organic evolution in a court of law. Okay. All right, Stephen Jay Gould, who's very much an evolutionist, anti-creationist for a long time, he said admitted this. He said the extreme rarity of transitions in the fossil record persists as the trade secret. Yeah, it's a trade secret of paleontology. So he's free to admit that, isn't he? All right, so all three of these particular predictions from the evolutionary viewpoint of what the fossil record, the rock layers should show, are no, just plain no. Okay? But what do we see? We see fossils, we see minor changes in characteristics, but they are variation within a kind. And that's basically what we see. We see big dogs, we see little dogs, right? Mary Jo mentioned that. That's not evolution. Okay, spotted dogs, not so spotted dogs, etc. That's not evolution. It's all right, same thing with the frog kind, the horse kind, etc. But that's what Genesis chapter 1 basically states, that God created things after their own kind. You find that 10 times. Not one kind changing into another kind. So biblically, okay, what are we seeing? It supports that, doesn't it? It really does. All right. Now, off and on during this presentation, I know I can get long-winded, okay? Poke your neighbor and say, hey, are you still awake?
Are you still awake?
Oh, okay, you are, okay. Uh-oh. No, okay, some of you are not, okay. I caught that. Are you still awake? I hit something. No. Okay, so the three predictions that you would find for the fossil record from the creationist perspective are all yes. But you might say, wait a minute, nutting. What about the textbooks, pictures that I have seen? That shows evolution. Well, you know what I usually say? Yeah, those are great pictures, great artwork, but it's not necessarily the evidence. You have to ask that question. Let's look. You know, you go over here to the Natural History Museum. They used to show you how Eohippus is going to evolve into modern present-day horse, right? This is out of a 5th grade book, by the way. Do you realize something? When you were taught evolution, it was not in high school. It was not starting in college. It started way back in the elementary school when you weren't asking, what's the evidence? So many students have accepted evolution before they ever even analyzed any data. I'm sure that's what happened to me, clear back in the 5th grade. I would have been an evolutionist. If I would have heard me speak back then, I would say he's nuts. Anyhow, okay, now there's some problems with that horse series. First of all, look at how good the artist makes it look. Look at the number of spots. Eohippus, then has fewer spots and then no spots. Oh, come on, that kind of helps drag a young person into believing in change. Now they add 50 million years or 60 million years with it. Now you have evolution, right? Yeah, it makes that connection. And, but there's some problems. You don't know anything about spots from a fossil. No, all you have is a pile of bones. There's no way. It turns out that the number of pair of ribs from one creature to the next go back and forth. No pattern. That's a problem. There's a problem with the foot structure. There's a problem with the tooth structure. How do you go from a browsing tooth to a grazing tooth? Leaving no transitions. What's going on there? All right. Now, the scientific name for Eohippus is not really Eohippus. His correct scientific name is Hyracotherium. And we have living Hyracotheriums today. And it's about the size of a rabbit, right there. How would you like to put a saddle on that beast? You're not going to get very far, are you? Okay? Anyhow, here's another textbook picture. This goes clear back to 3rd grade, okay? Maybe even 2nd. A fished amphibian. It shows how that lobe-finned fish, like the coelacanth, crawls out of the ocean, changes into the amphibians, and it's well on your way to becoming you. That's basically what they're saying. And so when you see that picture,
Great artwork.
what do you say? Great artwork.
What's the evidence?
What's the evidence? Okay, what's the evidence for that? At the time that book was written, there was nothing found, period. Since that time, they've had about 7 candidates for the transition from fish to amphibian. Every one fizzled. So nothing they had. But what did the book say? Right above that picture, they had this caption. Missing links. So they actually said transitional forms or missing links show how this process of evolution took place. How can something missing that's never been found show anything? All right? Well, the latest candidate is Tiktaalik, okay? Oh, okay. And they talk about thick wrist bones. Hold it. I looked at those. Those aren't wrist bones. They're fin bones. Why would you call them wrist bones? That helps you make that transition to believe in the evolution, right? To mammals. Okay. All right. Bill Nye, the science guy, used this as proof against Ken Ham in a debate several years ago. And before he ever used it in the debate, it was already proven wrong. Okay? Bill Nye should have known that, but he didn't, evidently. Anyhow, why? Because they found a trackway preserved in the mud, now turned to cement or turned to rock. They found this trackway. And what they found out is on that trackway, there were 4-footed creatures crisscrossing back and forth. Oh, wait a minute, but that was in a rock layer way below Tiktaalik. You can't be your own grandmother, okay? You have 4-footed creatures already before the guy that's going to evolve into 4-footed creatures evolves. That's a problem. Here's what Jennifer Clack said from University of Cambridge, the UK. We thought we'd pin down the origin of limbed tetrapods, 4 foot. We have to rethink the whole thing. That's what they're saying, okay? All right. This is out of a 4th grade unit study in evolution, okay? And put out by NOAA. And they're actually going to show you how whales evolved, okay? That's what they're going to do. And so there's their lineup right there, right out of their particular unit study. And it sounds really good, doesn't it? Some people now, depending on what university you're looking at, will look at the guy up on the upper left and say, yeah, it wasn't probably that guy. He probably evolved from some kind of a hippopotamus-looking thing. Okay, that's what they are saying. And so they'll say that this is the closest relative of whales right there, okay? There's your closest relative. But not the ancestor, is what they'll say. And University of California, Berkeley will actually say, hippos are the closest living relatives of whales. But they are not the ancestors of whales. In fact, none of the individual animals on the evogram, okay, evolutionary thing, is the direct answer of any other, as far as we know. That's why each of them gets its own branch on the family tree. Wait a minute, if this is true, then what they're saying, it's not this progression, it's boom, like this. It's a forest instead of one tree. Okay, now, all right, so basically that's what they're saying. But let's pick this one apart just a little bit. No matter what you're thinking about, most of them say there was a dog-like creature that evolved into a whale that started, okay? And there it is right there. That was the first thing in that unit study that they showed you. Well, you can go to the museum and find out what's the evidence of this guy and these guys like that. You find out one jaw. That's all they had at that time. And from that, they got what? The whole creature. And this convinced people in museums, especially kids. Okay? Especially kids. And we were all vulnerable to that. And we just brought that picture right into college with us. Okay? Thinking that was a proven fact. All right. So they didn't find that whole jaw either. All they found was the parts that are dark in color, real black looking. That's all they found. I think that's kind of stretching the evidence a bit because they didn't find at that point any other bones. Okay? All right, let's go up to the next one called Pakicetus. This is right out of, this is from the front cover of Science magazine in April of 1983. And somebody reading that magazine should have said, way back there, what should they said? Great evidence. Okay, great artwork. What's that evidence? At that time, people didn't. They just accepted it. Okay, but when you read the article, you found out all they found for that was the portion of the skull on the bottom that's dark in color. And guess what? No other bones. No other bones at that time. Okay? And wait a minute, one piece of a jaw, couple of teeth, and one bone at the back of the head? Is that all they found? Yep, that was called Pakicetus. And then listen to what they said. Bones prove whale walked. How can something without any backbone, any legs, any whatever, prove anything walked? You got a problem there. And since that time, they now have found more bones of Pakicetus, okay? And this is the 2004 model right there. That's what they're saying Pakicetus probably looked like. Well, again, which do you believe? You want to believe the 1983 model or the 2004 model? You see a lot of difference here, right? A lot of difference. And I would still question either one of them, okay? Okay, now let's go up this chart, down the chart according to the picture. Let's go down to the next one, Ambulocetus. Ooh, what is that one? Great artwork, you might say, when you see these pictures. What's the evidence? And you say, oh, there is the evidence right there. You got a whole skeleton. Do you realize when that went into the museum where Gingerish, who was one who had found this Ambulocetus with others, and did the research, they showed it as if they found all of the bones. Look, complete skull, everything. Really? Yeah. So they got the evidence. Okay, that must be what it looked like. But that's not the case, okay? That is not the case at all. When you ask what the actual evidence is, no, you're not looking at it. You have to look very carefully at most museum exhibits because they will show you two different colors. One color is they found, the other one they hadn't found, okay? But this one didn't even do that. This made it look like they found the whole thing, okay? And they showed this great skull for Ambulocetus. And this was then made casts of and sent to museums all over the country and for educational institutes as well. And you'd think, wow, they've got the whole skull. No, they didn't. In fact, this is from a videotape that was actually taken where Dr. Hans Fleissen, who was working with Gingerish, basically he admitted that they didn't find the whole skull. In fact, he said the part that was really going to be the identifier that this was a whale was missing. Notice the kind of grayish color? It's missing. And look at all the other stuff that was missing. You know, here's what they have. The red there on those bones were found almost 45 feet higher in the geologic record, assumed to belong to the same creature, okay? And so that's what they found. That's not enough evidence, but they're showing the whole skeleton, aren't they? So you have to be careful. And so, yeah, what's the evidence is a good question if you can actually dig deep enough to find it. Now let's go to Rhodocetus. That's the next one in the evolutionary line. The claim is this is the first creature with legs changing into flippers and a tail developing into a whale's tail. Dr. Werner basically did some research on it and found out it was a whale of a tail. That's what he said. Why? That's great artwork. What's the evidence? There you see some evidence, more artwork. But wait a minute, you see the bones that they actually may have discovered? That's all the bones that they showed, just a part of the background. Guess what? No tail, no flippers. Oh, no blowhole, by the way. You understand? This is a problem. When Dr. Gingerish, who was working with this thing, made all these claims about it, the first creature that developed legs or changing into flippers, Dr. Colonel Werner mentioned, he said, noting missing tail bones, asked how he knew it had a whale-like fluke, as he was telling everybody and was in the museum. Dr. Gingerish, quote, I speculated that it might have had a fluke. I now doubt that Rhodocetus would have had a fluked tail. Whoa. Okay. Well, what about the other one? Noting the missing flipper bones, okay? He asked if he knew he had legs turning into flippers. How do you know that? Dr. Gingerish Since then, we have found the forelimbs, the hands, and the front arms of Rhodocetus. Sounds good. And we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can spread out like flippers on a whale. Boom, there went that. And that was from Gingerish himself, who's the one who's been making all those claims about it. And Dr. Werner continued here, he said, oh, and they got it all, had all on video, by the way. And Dr. Carl Werner said, all 8 characteristics that Gingerish reported as whale features on many of the different supposed transitions are disturbingly non-whale features. Okay. One thing they used a lot in order to try to show you that you had, the whales used to have legs, they had legs, is that inside of that circle right there. And they said those are leftover leg bones leftover from millions of years of evolution. Well, guess what? That's a big assumption being made, right? Huge assumption. But in 2014, researchers, here's the article, researchers turn a long accepted evolutionary assumption on its head. Why? University of Southern California news release. Okay, has to do with whale sex and also reproduction. Okay, you needed muscle attachments in order for a baby whale to be born. You have to push, okay? And so basically, they now realize there's a function. It's not leftover legs, period, okay? All right, how many here have heard that dinosaurs evolved into birds? Anybody? Oh, lots of hands going up, okay. Well, that sounds really good. National Geographic carried a wonderful long picture article showing how it worked, all right? And anyhow, here's one of their famous pictures right here. It's a flying dinosaur, they call it. It's a missing link. Guess what? It was a hoax. Not National Geographic. They were caught up in it, okay? But somebody from China in that area would actually had put the bones from 5 different creatures together. And from 5, yep, all put together, did a great job, and sold it to the museum, okay? And there's a museum about 3 hours or 4 hours from my house that actually has those bones, by the way. All right, and they ended up with them, but it was a hoax. And there's the article right there. Scientists dispute missing link fossil. Why? They were able to find the other half, because this is this way, right? They looked at the, you might say, the cast above. It was totally different. Somebody messed up with it, and they finally were able to show it wasn't right. Since that time, many of the supposed links of bird evolution has all dropped out of the air. They all have. Okay. You know, when they had that article, here's Storrs Olson, a bird expert at the Smithsonian Institute. Basically, he accused the magazine of engaging in sensationalistic, unsubstantiated, tabloid journalism. Then he said clearly, the magazine is not receiving competent consultation in certain scientific matters. And he said also, he is especially galled or maddened by, okay, the society's assertion that a wide variety of dinosaurs definitely wore feathers. This is just a blankety-blank lie, he says, okay? He said there is now one, at that point when he was talking, not one undisputed example of a dinosaur with feathers. None. The public deserves to know this. Wow. All right. Here's what Alan Fiducia, University of North Carolina, basically said it this way. He's one of the top bird experts in fossil birds as well. He said, when they put that feathered dinosaur in the cover last year, I threw 30 years worth of magazines out of my house. He said National Geographic's journalism is a joke. He said the hair-like filaments that accompany some fossils come from beneath the skin. I can duplicate the effect by skinning the tail of a modern lizard. Now we have some young people there. Don't go home and try it. Okay, poor lizards. Or, yeah, they're just filaments, basically. And then, this quote here, last April, Nature published a paper by Kevin Padian. Kevin Padian is one of these paleontologists specializing in birds and bird fossils. He is pushing the dinosaur to bird evolution. He said, he's Padian at the University of California at Berkeley, on a pterosaur with a tail from the same fossil deposit were Archaeoraptor. Wait a minute, that was the one that National Geographic had that nice picture of, right? Same place. He said, Zoof says the tail was added by a local resident before selling it to a Chinese museum. So there's two fraudulent ones right now coming out of China right there. It's been used to prove dinosaur to bird evolution. The National Geographic had this particular picture too. The evolution of a wing. All right, this is right in their magazine, and you can see how they're showing how a leg on the top turns into a wing. You know what that's called? Artistic imagination. Okay? Or they give you the fossil too of what it was at, but it was still imagination. They didn't find those feathers. And then on the bottom, they showed in that magazine the evolution from the path from dinosaurs to birds. And it gives you the name of these guys, okay? Turns out that that was not in the right order. Not in the right. Those fossils were just placed from here or there, made it look like great evolution. We tore it apart at our office, okay? We tore National Geographic apart, okay? And here's what our artist came up with. And we did the research. We found out we have true birds. Where? Flying around like they should be today, okay? But wait a minute, look down there at the 110 supposed million year slot. That's a true bird. They found true birds with dinosaurs, by the way. But wait a minute, before the dinosaurs, they had those things called mesokiwis, okay? They're kiwi birds, okay? And then true birds even before the dinosaurs? You don't hear that, do you? No. You can't be your own grandmother. So that is a problem. Same thing with the horse series, by the way. They found the bones of modern-day horse in supposed rock layers below his supposed ancestors. Okay? Can't be your own grandmother. So these things are in the wrong orders. What does Dr. Kevin Padian say about it? No problem. It says Kevin Padian, the University of California, Berkeley. We don't always get everything in the fossil record in perfect order. Yes, it is a problem, okay? It is a big problem for evolution, but he's not admitting it. By the way, I have a real problem imagining even how a dinosaur is going to turn into a hummingbird. Or any other bird for that matter. Okay, it just doesn't seem to fit, but that's the theory, isn't it? At least from the theropod dinosaurs, or some of them were just as toothy as that big guy right there, right? Some of them were. Heavier body, massive, big on the tail. Doesn't seem like it was fitting, okay? You might say, what about Archaeopteryx? Oh, that was the proof for evolution of dinosaurs to birds originally. But they found out it flies like a true bird because of the flight feathers, a strong flyer. But it had little claws on its up in here. What's it going to use with those little claws? Hanging on branches, possibly, right? Yeah. There's a South American bird called a hoatzin. Hoatzin. Go look it up. It's almost identical to Archaeopteryx. Okay, we have living examples of them. Question, so did dinosaurs evolve into birds? I have a hard time imagining it, but then I'm going to say no. Why? Because they found a theropod dinosaur. This is the one that's supposedly evolving into birds, but it had 3 real birds in its stomach. They weren't evolving into birds. They were eating them. All right, another one. Did you know this? When you look at the geologic column, fossils of modern birds, what kind? Sandpipers, loons, ducks, flamingos, cormorants, albatross, parrots, owls, penguins, and robins. All those birds have been found in dinosaur rock layers. And not only that, they found other things like opossums, mammals, hedgehogs, and then snakes, boa constrictors, there's salamanders, lizards, crayfish, lobsters, and mayflies, all found in the same rock layers as you find the dinosaurs in. Now, when I was growing up, when I was on that television program teaching about the truth of evolution from the fossil record, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. And in fact, you go to almost every museum or even textbook, they don't tell you that. But they're there. But they're there. Okay? All right. Now, here's another issue that evolution's been having with the fossil record. And basically, it shows an ancient petrified salamander. It reveals its last meal. What is the problem here? This old salamander has soft tissue. You can actually see the soft tissue, the nerves, the organs, his last meal. Okay? All that preserved. How do you preserve that over those millions of years? Now they have found red blood cells, DNA pieces and strands, and soft, pliable tissue in dinosaur bone, petrified dinosaur bone. Some of it 65 supposed million years, some of it 140 million years. And, so Dr. Jack Horner was working as a paleontologist. He had a lab assistant. The lab assistant was Mary Schweitzer. And what happened was Mary Schweitzer started noticing the soft tissue in Dr. Horner's dinosaur. And she said, Jack, come over here. Yeah? Hey, tell me what you see. Guy pokes at it, looks at it with the forceps. And you know what he's told Mary Schweitzer? Well, I don't know for sure, but I think those creationists are going to love you. Why? How do you preserve soft tissue that long in the fossils for millions of years? Doesn't that call into question those millions of years? Very likely. In fact, Mary Schweitzer started doing a lot of research on the soft tissue. Tried to get her data published. Tried to. He said, I had one reviewer tell me that he didn't care what the data said. Don't trouble me with the facts, ma'am, okay? I don't care what the data says. He knew what I was finding wasn't possible. And then I wrote back and said, well, what data would convince you? And he said, none. Wow. Good open-mindedness there in the publishing department there, huh? But anyhow, well, now they found T-Rex and many more dinosaurs, etc. Even soft, pliable skin. Some have suggested, it's just biofilm, okay? It just came much, much later. Well, that now has been totally dismissed, okay? That is soft tissue. So the research, even Mary Schweitzer began doing the research and said, I wonder maybe hemoglobin might be the ticket. What if you saturate this stuff in hemoglobin? That'll give you iron. The iron might be able to preserve it a little bit more, etc. And so she did a research, and sure enough, you could actually take a ostrich, soft tissue, soak it in concentrated hemoglobin, and you can keep it from deteriorating for 2 years. Wow. So it said, proven. That's the answer. Well, there's a problem with that. 2 years is a far cry from 100,000 years, and a far cry from some of the fossils 180,000 or a million years old. That's a big stretch, isn't it? And a lot of the fossils you find are what? Don't have any iron. No iron whatsoever. Oh, that's a problem. And the lab results that she had to have concentrated hemoglobin. Where do you get that except for the chemistry lab, okay, or the pharmaceutical? But you also had to keep it dry, but bury it deeply and rapidly. Hold it. What most of those fossils of dinosaurs, I've done a lot of hunting for dinosaur bones. I found 2 by the time I was 15 years old, by the way. And what are they found in? Almost all of them are water deposited layers and what they call fluvial or river deposits, okay? They're not dry, all right? So there's been some major problems with that. Now they've also found many other fossils as well. This one was supposedly over 500 million years old, still had soft tissue. All right, that's a real stretch to think that it could last that long. And by the way, there was no iron present there either. And there's a list, this is just a partial list. Hundreds of fossils have now been discovered with soft tissue because they're looking for it now. They never thought about looking for it. When I was a kid, when I was hunting dinosaur bones, we used to bring the dinosaur bone home and we'd cut it with a rock saw. And not only that, I'd cut and polish that and make jewelry out of it, rings and bolo ties and belt buckles. That's what I did when I was 13, 14, 16 years old, okay? I loved it. I was gonna become Dinosaur Dave, okay? Specializing in dinosaur paleontology. And now I became Dinosaur Dave by a different method. I thought I'd beat you to it, Parnell. Age. All right. But when I was grinding on those dinosaur bones, making beautiful jewelry, once in a while I get a horrible, rotten egg smell. What was I grinding through that I never realized? Rotting tissue. Okay? I should realize clear back when I was 15 years old that that is a big problem for evolution that I believed all those years and still believed for many more years after that. Okay? I never even considered it as an issue. Well, the soft tissue, now also pliable dinosaur skin. And by the way, when you look at that dinosaur skin, notice one thing. Those are scales, not feathers. Okay? Those are scales. So we have a big question. Somebody asked me about it a little bit ago, about how do I fit dinosaurs into a creation perspective? God created everything, didn't he? Do you think he could have created a dinosaur? Of course. Look at the book of Job. Behold now behemoth, which I made with you. And the description fits that of a big old dinosaur, okay? Then you've got Leviathan. Whew, it talks about that guy. His breath kindles coals. Hold on, sounds like a dragon, doesn't it? There seems to be, from the studies that have been going on recently, that people saw these large reptiles and called them dragons. Now, the word dragon, do you realize what the original word was? What it meant? Large reptile. Originally a dragon, okay? So were dragons and were dragons and dinosaurs the same? Possibly so. Marco Polo visited China in 1271 AD. He reported that the emperor raised dragons to pull chariots in his parades. So they're large enough, aren't they? All right, he did. Then when you go to various places, like I've been in Natural Bridges National Park, taking lots of students there over the years. And basically, we lightened that up so you can see it better. It's a lot more obscure today, but you can still see it. It is actually what looks like an Apatosaurus type dinosaur. Right on the sandstone walls, where's that? Natural Bridges National Park. Okay, that's what you see. What do you think the native Anasazi's were seeing 2,000 years ago that actually made those drawings? Unless it was a dinosaur. This is the Havasu Canyon, and basically there's a sandstone cliff there too. What's that drawing of? It looks like this particular Edmontosaurus type dinosaur. All right, spitting image for what they have in the museum right now. Okay. Then you have an Asian collection. And the point is, people have seen some of these things, and they actually called them dragons. This one is a dead ringer for Bacher's famous dinosaur called Oviraptor. Okay, dead ringer for it. Amazon River Basin. This is another sandstone cliff right there. These guys are hunting something. What is that? That looks like a sauropod dinosaur. All right. This one is actually from ancient Sumatra. Again, are they hunting Big Bird from Sesame Street? Or is that Curthosaurus? We don't know for sure, do we? But it's evidently they're hunting it in ancient Sumatra. Anyhow, sauropod dinosaurs on a ornamental box found there. Those are definitely dinosaurs on that thing. Okay, and it's an ancient find. This is a Mesopotamian cylinder dated at 3300 BC, by whatever means they did that. But when you look at that, it's that type of dinosaur. That's what I would say from that seal. All right, this is a temple in Cambodia. And it was actually, you can go to Bible.ca and find it, because he has done a lot of research on it. A lot of these pictures as well can be found also on their site, as well as many other sites. But what is that figure at the top of his head? It looks like a stegosaurus, right? Looks just like a stegosaurus. That temple is supposed to be 1,000 years old. And you look at all the columns, we know those particular animals that they have on, they depicted on the other columns. This is the only one we don't have living today. So I'll take it later, okay? So this is in Cambodia, okay? So, in Mexico, what have they found? Artifacts? Tyrannosaurus? They even have people fighting one of those guys, not doing too well, but, okay. Bishop Bell's tomb. He was buried in 1496 in Carlisle Cathedral, okay? And a brass engraving is all the way around that tomb, okay? Whoa, what is it? Looks like that type of dinosaur. Did they see him? Maybe. Did they see the bones? And this is what people have said. Oh, they saw the bones of these things, and that's where they got all the pictures, okay? All right, that's what they said about this one, too. But they found a fossil that they called Dracorex. And this was at Stanford University. They were having the Adrienne Meyer, I believe, and she was the the paleontology historian, okay? That's what she was. And what they said, she said this: the skull looks strangely familiar to anyone who has studied dragons. Dracorex has a remarkable resemblance to the dragons of ancient China and medieval Europe. Now, see those nubbins? Those are, when you look at a horn, the horn will come off, it leaves you the core part, okay? Frequently, that's what you're going to see. Of cow as well. And so those were bigger horns, of course. Dracorex. Somebody said, oh, The people there in China must have seen the bones of Dracorex, and that's what led to all of their mythology. Except for one thing. Where have they found the skull of Dracorex? North Dakota. Long ways from China. Okay? They didn't find it in other places. Okay, St. George got his fame, known as a dragon slayer, by the way. The dragon slayer. But anyhow, he has 4 different plates or 5 plates of him killing different type of dragons. They all look like dinosaurs that we now have reconstructed from the fossil record. It's fairly close, okay, to dinosaurs. These are dinosaurs-like things. Okay, a good book for you is, Guide to Dinosaurs. If you want, there's one called Dragons or Dinosaurs. It's actually a documentary. It's a documentary. It's not just your kids one. This is for you adults, okay? And it's amazing. It's showing the connection of dragons and dinosaurs. Okay, we promised you something, and I'm going to hold true to that promise, and we're going to go through. I'm not going to talk about the details of this, but when you go to the museum, they'll tell you, you had apes in your ancestry, right? That's Uncle Harry himself. Okay, there he is. And they show you in textbooks a lineup. One thing, all the way from monkeys to man. But that should precipitate the question. Great artwork, what's the evidence? What about that guy that's circled there on the bottom left? What's the evidence? All they had for that guy at the time, it's called Java, was a skull cap. Nothing else. Nothing else whatsoever. That's really stretching the evidence, isn't it? And I can talk about many of those as well. There have been things that they know was a problem. Like, for instance, this was a reconstruction of a supposedly half-ape, half-man found in the state of Nebraska. So you say, hey, great artwork. What's the evidence for that one? One tooth. The whole tooth, but nothing but the tooth. And they figured out that's what he looked like, right? Later they found out that tooth did not belong to an ancient man, but it belonged to a pig. And so it was one, okay, belonged to a pig. They made mistakes, sure, yeah. Piltdown Man, a deliberate hoax. Somebody took a jaw of an ape, filed down the teeth, put it together with the skull of a modern man, hid it for a scientist to find. Sure enough, they took a bait and it became Piltdown Man, okay? That stood as proof for human evolution for years, decades and decades. And even some museums still have it. And it was already proven false 30, 40, 50, well, almost 100 years ago now. Okay? Raumpithecus, second grade book. Was a man-ape, was not a real man. What's the evidence for that? All they had were 2 small shreds of jaw. Okay? And from that, they got Mr. Raumpithecus and the rest of the family in there. Then they found more bones, and they said Raumpithecus was nothing but an ape. Off the family tree. How about Lucy? They found about, I'm going to say 40% of a skeleton. And wow, that's what they found. Okay. How come when you went to the museum, they showed a gorgeous face, hands, feet, etc. for Lucy? That convinced young people that evolution is true. What? What's going on here? Okay. Artwork. Artwork convinces young people, a lot of times, before they ever get to this university, that evolution is a fact. Okay? That's what's happening. They didn't have the skull for Lucy. Now they're really thinking the French Science Journal says that apes of the species Australopithecus did not represent the origin of man. No. They should be removed from the relevant family tree. Okay? All right. Now they're talking about the skulls of Australopithecines like Lucy. Okay? Notice it says up there, Tim White made this reconstruction of an afarensis skull using parts of, not one, not two, several individuals. A piece here, a piece there. What? happens. All right, Time magazine talks about one toe bone. And then it talks about the skull that was found a ways away and said this toe bone proves the creature walked on two legs because of a certain angle on that bone. Okay? That's what it was. Oh, that was fine. Problem is, Dr. Johansen, who found Lucy, was credited with it. He didn't find it, actually. He's dubious about categorizing the toe bone with the rest of the fossils. Why? He said it's separated in time by, he said, several hundred thousands of years, and it's found 10 miles away from the skull fragments. Put them together. Again, Ida was brought in just in the nick of time to celebrate Charles Darwin's birthday. Okay? There it was. Boy, they really, really messed up on this one. And even the paleontologist said, that's not a fossil link. And yet it convinced the public. In fact, that's a fossil lemur. And we have living fossil lemurs look exactly like that. It's not a link whatsoever. Well, that same year, in October, they were celebrating the publication of his book on the origin of species, okay? And, they introduced Artie. And you look at that on the bottom left, they had a whole skeleton, right? No, they didn't. They said it was like putting together powder rather than bones. And you're going to make it look like anything you want it to look like. And by the way, the skull for Artie, notice all those different colors? It was reconstructed from over 30 individuals. Peace, sir. Peace, sir. Okay. But look at the jaw on that of Artie. If you look at the jawbone on the number A there, that's strictly an ape jaw, by the way. Strictly an ape jaw. And, so we have Ida, we have Artie, both brought in the 2009. I don't buy either one of those, by the way. What about in 2015 when they introduced this guy? All right, but whenever I say you see something like that, wait and see. Don't just jump on it and say, oh, they found this, they found that. Wait and see what they say just a couple years later, okay? And see if that really is the case still. All right, for instance, wait and see. What did they find out just a little bit later? The portions of this particular skeleton shows or indicates iodine deficiency. 1. Many bones broken in the same spots. Oh, if they're all broken on the arm, guess what? They're getting. Somebody is hunting it, breaking the arm, getting the bone marrow on that was a delicacy. Okay? That's why. Right? Too many crushed skull fragments. He was the hunted, not the hunter. And then they found out it was drastically younger than they originally thought. And then it's the indication of sediment transport, like a little flooding, not mixing, and mixing instead of in situ or in place. Okay? There's a great book called Contested Bones right there. Includes the latest on the human evolution. So there's some good fossil record books. It's available. Look in our brochure here. You can get those books there, okay? So when you see a new National Geographic article and they say, hey, that's your great-great-great-granddaddy, say, great, what's the evidence? And do they really know that from the evidence they're trying to show you? Do they really know that? All right. Are those composites is another big question you can ask, okay? Are they composites? Look at those skulls there. All of them were composites, put together from several pieces, but you would not know that, will you? It just won't be there. All right? Okay, so what do the fossils indicate? What do they say? Nothing. Rocks don't talk, but we talk for them, don't we? We do. But what we do see, we see complexity wherever we look. We see things staying put, not the type of change for evolution, and we see distinct groups. That's exactly what we see. And that fits nicely with the creation, the fall, and the flood. Okay? And again, tomorrow, what are we going to talk about? Geology. Who's the hero of the plot? Mary Jo says she likes this lecture better than all of them. Okay? And it's good positive evidence for you. Is there lots of time, lots of water, catastrophe? What is it? Who's the hero of the plot? That's tomorrow night. All right, so I'll stop right there. Your turn, Parnell. Mary Jo's going to come up here and thank you. Mary Jo's going to come up here. I have her come up because she answers all the hard questions, and most of them are hard questions.
Yeah, so
Okay.
thanks, Dave. We're gonna enter into some Q&A,
Yeah, thank you.
and all questions are welcome. So I don't expect to have any hostile questions, but occasionally we
Even
have
if it is, that's okay.
or hostile people. Sometimes people have just taken the opportunity to make statements and kind of criticize rather than ask a question. So we ask that there be that your primary thing you do if you get the mic is ask a question of our speakers. So if you have a question, whatever it is, skepticism's great, we welcome it, or any kind of point of clarification, anything you want, any subject, feel free to raise your hand, and we could call on you. And something you about tonight, some other subject, maybe last night we covered biology, and tomorrow we'll cover geology, but you can ask questions related to any of those things as well.
Sure.
If you're curious, it doesn't have to be based on tonight's lecture. So if you have a question, please raise your hand.
Or if you thought about a question from last night. Okay? There's a question right here. I know he wanted to ask one earlier. That's great.
How long do you believe dinosaurs were around for?
How long do I believe dinosaurs
Yeah.
were around?
Since like when to when? I don't know.
From the creation to probably as late as 1,500 years or, let's say 700 years ago, based upon the drawings, etc. Okay, that's very different from the evolutionary perspective that I would have taught many more years ago. Okay, so they're recent. They're fairly recent, and are they created? Did people see them? I believe so, based upon the drawings that we saw, and that would have been all those drawings. By the way, were pretty recent. Okay, they were after the sandstones were already put down because they were on the sandstone walls. Okay. So fairly recent. That answer your question there? As far as what I believe?
Yeah, that's it.
Now, yeah, not everybody would have agreed with me, but that's okay. I wouldn't have agreed with myself back then.
Another interesting thing about that is carbon-14 related to that. But I don't know if you want to talk about that. You can talk about that
Well,
later,
while you're
maybe.
giving the mic to somebody else, what about that carbon-14? Do you realize you've dated dinosaur bones by radiocarbon dating? Now, nobody thought about it because they thought they were so ancient. There's no way that could be young. And there couldn't be any carbon-14 left because the half-life of carbon is so short, 5,740 years roughly. Okay? But when they dated petrified dinosaur bones, and it's happened, they got some of the samples in the area where I live, by the way, and they ended up dating it, and they were supposed to be 140 million years. They got thousands of years, not millions of years. Something's wrong, right? So what do you do with that? And the same thing with coal deposits, thousands of years, not millions of years. So the answer to that has always been, we've got groundwater coming through. That just brings fresh carbon-14 in, so that answers it. Except for one thing, they decided to test that one out. And so they took pure diamonds, crushed them down. Sorry, girls. But Diamonds are supposed to be the girl's best friend. But anyhow, they crushed these diamonds down. And they took carbon-14 dating on that, and they ended up with thousands of years, not millions of years. And why carbon? Diamonds? Pure carbon. Nothing, no groundwater is going in or out of that thing. It's pure diamonds. So we have to rethink that, okay? Rethink that. That answered your question real quickly. And I can go into the specific details, and what we have found is the problem with carbon-14 dating, and we can answer that one a little bit later. Let's get your
So
question.
following on with the story, when is creation? How far
When is
back
creation?
is? How many millions of years or thousands?
How many years ago was creation? How old are you?
I don't want to know. 51.
Prove it.
have.
I want a scientific method. Now, prove how old you are. So I'm playing with you.
Yeah.
Forgive me, but how would you prove it?
With a paper that says that I was born in Pacific
Just a
State.
paper? I want scientific evidence, not some paper.
My mom.
Ask your mom, right? She was there. She knows. That's called eyewitness reports. But I want scientific evidence. You know, he couldn't do it.
Cut him in half.
Oh, is it cut them in half, count the rings? That's not gonna work, sorry, we're not gonna do that tonight. I can just see the campus ministry, or the campus newspaper tomorrow. Creationists cut somebody in half to count the rings. No, we're not gonna. No, we're not gonna do that. Okay, now what you said is the only reliable methods to figure out how old you are is that birth certificate and ask my mom eyewitness reports. She was there. Those are the only real reliable ones. All of the other dating methods, whether I look at teeth grinding, etc., will all depend upon what you've been eating. Okay? And assumptions. And I have to compare that with somebody that I know their age of to find out the actual wear on teeth, etc. and etc. Okay? But I have to have real data here to be able to compare that it's on. But every one of the dating methods, by the way, rely on certain assumptions. So let's get back to it. What historical record would we have for the age of the Earth? The only one that I see is look at cultures around the world and find out what they've said. What do they say? And you'll find out it's fairly young, according to all those records, including the biblical records. When you look at the biblical record, boy, that's really good. The Hebrew had amazing genealogy all the way back to Adam, and then they had all of these things going on after that. And they don't get much more than 6,000 years, do they?
That's correct.
Okay, so how old was the Earth? Let me think. Man was created on day 6.
Correct.
Earth on day 1. Oh, so it's whatever Adam was plus 5 days. Okay. All right, so that would be your answer from a historical record. And eyewitness report, too. God was there. He said, this is what he did. Okay? Everything else is assumption. And when they use radioactive decay dating methods, by the way, for those of you who are familiar with those, when they date rocks of known age, they're coming up with horrible results. Okay? Horrible results. Like Mount St. Helens erupted. Lava from the recent volcanic lava dome cooled. They decided to date that. Guess what they found? Dates all the way from 340 million years at the least to 2.8 million years. And it just happened 30 years before. Same thing happened in Hawaii. The lava flows there, but they had dates all the way from 2 million roughly to a billion years. And it's just cool. They knew when that happened. So a lot of these methods are suspect because they don't give you good dates on rocks of known age. They have found recent volcanic lava flows in the Grand Canyon, flowed down into the canyon. They ended up with dates on the recent things as at least as old, and sometimes, depending on the method, twice as old as the rock layers underneath the entire canyon that the canyon carved through. Impossible. Okay. And so that makes it a little suspect. All right, and I had a geologist answer it for me one time. In fact, one year I was there, and he said, well, your data's got to be false. You know, I gave him the information. I said, go ahead, check it out. You know, I'll be back. The next year I was back. I saw the same ranger, same spot in the canyon. I asked him the same question. He said, oh, you again. Then he said, I found out there you're 100% right. Okay, why is he giving the same ranger talk? And I said, well, I found out there's a good answer to the problem. Here's what this ranger, who's a geologist as well, here's what he said. It has been shown that these methods are not accurate on recent events. You caught on right away, didn't you? Then how do you rely on them to be accurate on other rocks that you don't know the age of, right? So that was an issue. Okay, any more other questions? Somebody here? Okay. And by the way, feel free to just stick around about as long as we want. We've got this building, this room for a while. And then afterwards, after we close out, come on up, talk to us individually as well, if you want to do that. Okay.
I heard a really compelling argument a while back about fossilized trees in the upright position going through multiple layers of strata, like they were.
Yeah.
And can you comment more on that? Because I thought that was just really amazing.
Those are actually called poly-many, straight for strata or layers. Polystrate trees is what they're called. And they're not only trees, but they're fossils the same way. And in fact, that one professor was working with his graduate student, and they were out there, they were classifying these little conodonts, call them worm teeth, okay, if you want, okay? But they were classifying them, showing the evolution of these conodonts over supposedly this thin little section, supposedly representing 20 million years of history, okay? The professor is going along, ooh, this is a good one, puts it in his vial, labels it. This one's a good one, okay? And then he finally gets to another thing, and he said, ooh, what's that? As he was looking at his magazine. Oh, he takes it out, throws it off. The graduate student asked the question, well, professor, what was that? Isn't it significant? He said, oh, it's just an ammonite. They're common around here. He said, wasn't that a tough little buzzard to stand on its tail upright instead of laying down for 20 million years as this mud slowly piled around? The professor said, oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Went right back to classifying. Guess what? He missed the big picture. That was a polystrate fossil, okay, going through many layers. Petrified trees going through many, many layers as well in many parts of the world, okay? So yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea that maybe those layers weren't, instead of 30 million years, some of them go through 100 million years of history. And you say, but they're not deteriorated. What? No, they didn't stand there for that long. They would have totally decayed. And so it shows you that those layers could have been put down quite rapidly. And that's the best answer I could do.
And you have those tomorrow.
Tomorrow I'm going to show you some of those pictures. I'll show you some, so you'll see it. Parnell, I think he wants to ask a follow-up question on that one.
How is that not anecdotal evidence? That story about the graduate student and the professor. Like, how do I know that happened?
How did the thing stand on end? That
No,
tells you
how do
the-
I know what you said actually happened?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, guess what? I had talked to the graduate student. It actually happened. Okay.
But how do you
But
prove
I have
that
to
you
believe
talked
him.
to him?
What?
How do you prove that you talked to him? That's anecdotal evidence. You just dismissed anecdotal evidence earlier, but now you're bringing it up to prove your point.
Okay. People who believe in evolution are being taught by their professor right here at the university, right? Do they question them? Or just somebody who goes against the status quo? Okay, so good, I see your point, and, but you have to trust your source, okay? And so, and that was Dr. Gary Parker, by the way, that I first got that from. Dr. Gary Parker, who was actually an instructor for a while at Dordt College, non-believer, and but he was teaching over there, and that's part of what he would say. Now, Gary Parker, very, love that guy. Okay, go ahead. Okay, well, Gary Parker took the graduate record exam at one time, and it's an amazing guy. He took that graduate record exam and got 100% on it. They said, no way, that can't happen. Made him take it again. Next time, 100%. Extremely brilliant, okay? He really is. I had the opportunity to sit under him for a while. And so he was brilliant, but he seemed to be able to take all of the stuff and put a thread through the whole thing and show how all this fit together. Go ahead, Mary Jo.
You're right, though. It is. It's anecdotal.
Anecdotal.
Okay, and you can throw that piece out if you want, but it's pretty hard to throw out the evidence of the actual trees going through multiple layers.
You will see those tomorrow.
I mean,
if
you could
come.
go to the site and see them. And so, you know, you take the anecdotal, okay, you take it, it's not as not as good of evidence as actual observation, right? Yourself. But every one of us knows we cannot go out and verify every fact that or everything we hear.
Yeah.
We would go absolutely crazy if we tried that. And so, yes, we try to be objective.
Right.
And yes, we try to look at the evidence. Every one of us, hopefully, is honest looking at evidence. But we all know we take an awful lot on faith. You know, we've had students that tell us, oh, I'm so objective, I test everything scientifically. And I go, oh, well, that means when you got up this morning, before you took a drink of water, you had to take your water into the chemistry lab, perform the test to make sure it wasn't poisoned. You know, well, based on what? Based on general knowledge and a past experience, we believe that water is not poisoned or we wouldn't take a drink of it. Well, maybe we'd filter it anyway. I don't really trust what comes out of the faucet that much.
We like filtered water.
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying is no one can test everything. And so we all end up believing a whole lot more than we think we do. And I would just encourage you, you go through your day and go, well, was I able to test that out for myself and this out for myself? We would never drive down the road if we had to prove, you know, that it was safe to do so.
That somebody isn't texting.
Yeah.
We're driving in the other lane coming our way.
We drive down the road in faith that we're going to get where we're going to get to.
Yeah, right.
And we all know there's a chance that won't happen. And so I just want to encourage you, you know, yes, check out the evidence the best you can, but realize that we all operate on faith.
That's right.
And so the question becomes, where do you place your faith? You know, the evolution model, The faith is in time and chance and natural processes. The biblical creation model, we put our faith in an intelligent, wise, and we believe good creator. Now, can we prove that scientifically? No, we can't. Okay? We can't prove scientifically that God is good or that he's wise or that he's all powerful, but we can see enough evidence and we can experience enough of this creator God ourselves that we're confident to place our lives into the hands of this God. If we reject that, then we're saying, okay, we think we're smarter, wiser, whatever, but we can't prove. We can't prove evolution. It's not been proven scientifically either.
It does not. There was a question here first. Okay.
Do you, are you, do you know about, well, I read in Infinite Energy magazine when I was getting there about, it was an article about, scientists, I don't know what science it was, but about 1903, he published something about in aqueous solutions. There are a small scale in space and time, spontaneous departures from thermodynamic equilibrium until entropic terms develop around it and bring it back to thermodynamic equilibrium. And have you heard of any of this? It was published in some reference book, and is when the inside of the cell, the living cell was considered amorphous protoplasm many years ago. Was that considered like an aqueous solution, from which now it's known to be finely structured in very small parts that are close enough together they could tap into that energy if, like, if we had the protection of heaven on earth, like before this fall, and maybe afterwards, would we be able to live forever without eating and drinking? Because of these, this is bigger than the quantum scale, but it's too small to be tapped into with the technology that they had way back then in 1903. But what about now when some of these things are known to be very finely structured in the cell?
I didn't follow most of that. You may have. You have better hearing.
Yeah, I don't know about tapping in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know about tapping into the energy of the cell, but yes, Darwin thought that the cells were just kind of a blob of protein or protoplasm.
Protoplasm, like
He didn't
gel.
understand. He had no conception really of the complexity of cells and of the amazing biochemical reactions and so on going on inside of the cells. And so over the years, scientists have, as they've studied cellular biology and biochemistry and genetics and all these fields, we've learned so much more about cells and what's involved in there. I don't know anything about the tapping into the energy that you're talking about. I do know that I've heard people talking, and maybe some of you that are in computer science have a better idea of this, but I've heard people talk about actually trying to create computers based on DNA or
That's a storage
biochemical.
system for sure.
Yeah, using synthetic DNA as a storage system. Have you got anybody heard about that? I just I heard about it, I don't know anything about it, so I really can't answer your question there,
Right.
except for the complexity of the cells is just enormously more than what Darwin ever thought. In fact, I often wonder if Darwin had the kind of scientific knowledge that we have today, would Darwin have continued in his evolutionary beliefs? We don't know that. We don't have any way to know that, but I mean, he did not even know about Mendel's principles of genetics. The Mendelian genetics was published after Darwin's book, The Origin of Species. And Mendelian genetics answers many of the questions that Darwin was trying to answer, was his ideas of natural selection. And, you know, he didn't know anything about where you get the variations from. He didn't understand mutations. He accepted a form of Lamarckianism, which said that, which was the inheritance of acquired traits and so on. And so I often wonder, you know, had Darwin been born a century and a half later, would he be up here talking about creation?
Would he have been, yeah.
We don't know that, of course,
Yeah.
but yeah. You know, one of the things that sometimes creationists get faulted and say, well, you're not being scientific, or you don't value science. That isn't true. We value science, but we understand that science is based on observation and experimentation. And we understand that scientific hypotheses and theories and so on, they change as we learn more. Because science is a human endeavor trying to explain this physical universe that we live in. And, you know, we might learn some things, but later on we might learn some more scientifically.
Yeah.
And so as scientists who believe the biblical account, there are two different ways of looking at reality, really. The more that the science supports what the Bible says or agrees with what the Bible says, the more likely it is that it's reality in our way of thinking. So didn't really answer your question, maybe,
No.
but that's what we got.
Well, one thing about that, go ahead, about the using DNA on computers. Years ago, they had already figured out, and they could actually store enough information on the DNA that they could get all of the different library books in the library, the Congress system, okay, Library of Congress, all of them on one strand of DNA, okay?
Based on the sizes.
Based on
the size and the amount of information.
the information they were able to get. The only problem is they could get it stored, but they were still working at that point on the retrieval system for it. And to be able to make it go faster. Yeah, I have that problem, yeah.
Most of you, when you go take a test, you go, hey, I've got a great storage system, it's retrieval, that's the problem.
Yeah.
You got a question here?
Question.
Oh yeah, so my question is, you guys quoted different people who saw the evidence but just decided to ignore the evidence rather than consider it. So my question was, I took some pictures, but I was wondering, are there like well-known names where it's gonna be, are these things easy to find? Like if I was to look up people who saw evidence for creation or saw evidence against evolution and just blatantly said no without considering it, is that easy to find? Is there a website to find like multiple of those? Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, but let me clarify your question.
Go
You're
ahead.
saying,
I think
did you catch,
the presentation is recorded. So if you go to our YouTube channel off the flyer, then you can get the slides where they have the references. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's,
Right.
Yeah, usually it was fairly.
and if there's anything there that like you're like, I can't track it down, please just let me know, and I can, or you can contact these guys if you can want their information, or you can just contact me through our ministry here on campus, and yeah,
sometimes
talk to
some of
Gary. He
those
can connect you with
references-
me.
Some of those references frequently, some of those references might even be in the notes section on my PowerPoint. Okay, so I'd be glad to give those over.
I think that's muted.
I think I'm muted.
All right.
Another question?
All right. I think I want to ask one question.
Uh-oh.
And my question is, can you tell us your journey related to your faith and the subject of evolution and creation? Can you kind of sum up your path a little bit in terms of when you switched over to being creationists? Just take us on a little journey of your story. Love to hear it. Is that a specific enough question?
I can tell you mine.
We're interested in the faith. We're interested in the subject of evolution and creation. Just kind of curious.
When I was young, I always believed there was a God, but I also believed evolution was a fact. Okay, because that's all I'd ever been taught, all the way through my training, all the way through teaching then on the college level. I still believed in evolution, okay? And it wasn't until we started doing the research for ourselves that we found out there was ample evidence against evolution. But keep in mind, at that point, I was very comfortable with evolution, and I had never had any cause to question it. I didn't have a faith until my third year of college, and I just drug evolution right along with my faith. Okay, that's what I ended up doing. I kind of like both believing in theistic evolution. That's kind of what you were calling a hybrid, okay, between evolution and creation. And so I thought, oh yeah, I was comfortable with it. I didn't even have any thing that says it didn't work, okay? Until we started doing our own research. We got that one book, Evolution, the Fossils Say No. And I said, wait a minute, what do you mean? The fossils say no to evolution. I've got enough experience with fossils. I think it's the best proof for evolution. And so we read that book, and I said, either the guy's got to be absolutely nuts, or maybe he's got a point that he knows something, like Mary Jo says, something we don't know. Okay? And we said, we better do our own research instead of relying on what everybody has been telling us all of these years. Okay? Because they were coming from a very evolutionary perspective. Virtually all of my teachers were probably believers in evolution. And so that started our journey, you might say. Now, I ended up coming to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, but like I say, drug evolution right along with me. And so it wasn't until teaching on the college level is where I started evaluating it, okay? I was teaching on the college level, and that's when we found the information. That's close enough? Okay. All right.
Thanks, guys. I've heard their story over the years a few times, and they're going to be sharing some of their story at our service on Saturday night, a little bit more detail. But
oh, that's a great one to talk about. All amazing things that some people might call them coincidences, but when you see enough of them, one right after another, after another, after another one, and then look back and how it looked like God's been leading. How God specifically spoke at times, too. And like somebody standing right next to me. Took me by surprise, okay? Or provision, all this kind of stuff. It was an amazing journey with after we started this creation ministry, okay? Amazing. Believe it or not, we've been doing the creation ministry now. This is our 40th year of Alpha Omega Institute when we started the organization, to be able to show other people about some of the things we were researching.
it kind of seems kind of crazy how you would spend your whole life teaching creation science as a Christian. It's obviously you're kind of a minority in Western culture and civilization, and so Why is that important to you? Why would you spend all this time? Is this part of your Christian faith that you think this is so important? Why is it so important that you would spend so much of your life being a minority in this viewpoint and spending all your energy presenting it? Like, can you sum that up for us?
Well, yeah, it is part of the Christian faith, but it's also a desire to seek truth, you know, and expose lies where we find them. And so, you know, for people that, I would just encourage people, if they don't believe what we said tonight, it's okay, you know. And we understand it took us time. It took us a long time to work through, you know, and even after we would say that we were creationists, we would occasionally come upon something and go, wait a minute, that's an evolutionary thought. I'm interpreting things through evolutionary glasses, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And so, like tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about the flood evidence. And I remember specifically that there was a pastor that talked to us, and he said, don't you just see evidence of the flood all over western Colorado, where Dave grew up looking for dinosaur bones and other fossils.
This is after
And we were already,
creation.
we already believed in creation, we believed in God, we were following the Lord the best we could. But we went home from talking with that pastor and we just laughed. We thought he really believes in the flood and the ark and all those animals, and he looks at those rock layers and he thinks they were laid down rapidly. And we thought, must be crazy. Well, the next time we got back to western Colorado, we went out on the desert, we looked at the rock layers, and it's like, you know, when you look through a optical illusion with the box thing, you know, and you look at it one way and all of a sudden it flips and you see a different picture.
You're looking at the outside instead of the inside of the box.
It's kind of like that because we're looking at things through our experience, through our worldview, through everything we've been taught. And so if we're honest and we really want to know truth, I believe that from Scripture, if we seek truth, we will find it. And Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. He's the measure of truth, according to Scripture and according to, you know, our belief system and our experience in life. We believe that to be true. Now, we can't prove that to you, but it takes a step of faith. I like what Josh McDowell used to say, and maybe he still does. He said, you can look at the evidence. Can you prove before you get on an airplane that it's not going to crash? I mean, think about it. An airplane is a collection of non-flying parts. What is there that flies in that airplane? Not the wings, not the engine, not the guy up front, the pilot. There's nothing in that airplane that flies. It's a collection of non-flying parts, and yet, when it's put together right, it'll fly, right? And you know, you can look at the evidence. You can't prove that airplane's not going to crash, but what you do is you say, there's sufficient evidence, even if I don't have exhaustive evidence, even if I can't prove it 100%, there's enough evidence there that I'm willing to stake my life on it.
Put 100%.
When you go on that airplane, whether you can prove it 100% or not, you put 100% of your body on that airplane. You can't say, well, I believe it 80%, so I'll put 80% of me in there. Doesn't work that way, does it? And it's the same way, I think, with the biblical Christian faith. There's plenty of evidence. And it comes from Scripture, it comes from archaeology, it comes from science, it comes from the ancient manuscripts, it comes from fulfilled prophecy, it comes through the testimonies of people who follow Jesus and know him personally in their own lives. And so you have all this evidence, but for each person it takes a step of faith. And so we just want to encourage you, keep looking, keep seeking truth. And, you know, if you've got questions, talk to people that know Jesus. Talk to people that have studied. And we believe it's important because we believe if you're going to build your life, you want to build it on truth, not on falsehoods. What good does it do us if we build our life on something that's false? You get to the end of your life and you find out, wait, I got my ladder on the wrong building. That's not going to work, is it? And so we want to just encourage each one of us, all of us, to keep seeking truth, keep following truth. And I guess that's what I would say. I think it's just so important. And you know what? According to Scripture, according to the Bible, it's not just in this life that truth is important. Because the Bible talks about a life after this life. According to atheists or atheism, you're done with this life and your molecules go back to the ground and that's all there is. There's not a lot of hope in that. But in the biblical Christian faith, and what we believe from the Bible is our life can go on, and we can have eternal life in Jesus Christ by being united with Him through faith. And so we just want to encourage you in that. It really is an important issue. It goes way beyond tonight. It goes way beyond. It impacts your entire life. And what you believe about your origins, what you believe about your relationship with the Creator, God of the universe, is going to impact the way you live your life. So that's why.
It's important. One example, too, University, Northern Illinois University. We had a student stand up and said, "I can't believe the Bible." Well, consequently, he couldn't believe what Jesus Christ did. Consequently, he couldn't believe in anything what you're talking about, salvation, eternal life, etc. Because he said, why can't you believe the Bible? He says, because the Bible says the earth is suspended on the backs of two turtles. No, it doesn't.
Really? He really
But
said
you
that.
understand, he had bad knowledge, had bad information for some reason, and that was keeping him from even thinking about the truth of what the biblical faith and Christianity was. So it was important for him. I don't think we changed his mind when we actually showed him, no, it doesn't. There were a bunch of atheist students of his group, atheists all around him, whispering, "No, it doesn't." But he was sticking to his guns. Yes, it does. Okay.
It's only one turtle, right?
What?
It's on the back.
Oh, a wonder. No, no.
According to my interpretation.
But do you understand? If your faith on evolution, if your faith on atheism is built on the wrong information, I think it's important for somebody to come along and knock out those turtles from underneath them. Okay?
So read the Bible. It won't hurt you. I mean, if you never read it before, go ahead and read it.
Thanks, Mary Jo. Thanks, Dave. I think unless you have a question, buddy? All right. Come on. It's our youngest college student right here.
Boy, I think these college students are getting a lot younger every year. Or am I getting older?
Yes.
How big was a T-Rex?
How big was T-Rex?
Big. Something you don't want to see stand on you. Okay, fair enough? One that could actually look over the roof of most houses, okay? So what are they, up to maybe the biggest one, 30 ton, maybe? Big. I've seen, huh?
Unless it's a baby.
Unless it's, yeah, they were young too. Yeah, they started out in eggs about this big. Even T-Rex probably, big egg.
Cut it.
Yeah, and so they were young twins as well, okay? And so those are big T-Rexes, but they weren't the biggest ones. There are others, you look at Apatosaurus was bigger, they were heavier. There's Supersaurus. That was Dr. Jim Jensen found that, pretty close to where my house is. And then you've got Gigantosaurus was even bigger, okay, than T-Rex.
All right.
I think we're gonna close it out here, and if y'all want to hang out at all, talk to our speakers, and with each other, feel free. We have the room till 10. So Dave and Mary Jo, thank you very much. We have one more lecture tomorrow night if you're interested, 7 o'clock. Geology, who's the hero of the plot, time, water, or catastrophe. And there's some
Handouts over here, if you wanna take them, they give some of the best evidences of creation.
Why don't you give a stack to these guys here? All of them, they're our students. Might be good to look at, refute if you want it, it's okay, and email me questions. Discovercreation.org, how about maybe AOI at discovercreation.org, it'll get to me eventually. Okay, my secretary will forward that to me.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
AOI here.
Thanks, Dave and Mary Jo.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all the work you do, Parnell. And the fact that you care enough to
It deserves a clap.
University campus. You care enough to bring even people like me. It's not hard. All right.
It deserves a clap. It deserves a better clap.
Calder.